Welcome to Block 47, our Celebrating the States Block of the Month. This is our version of the North Carolina block. For this block, you will need 3 fabrics, a light, a medium, and a dark. From the light fabric, you need to cut 4 squares that are 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches and 8 rectangles that are 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Also from the light, you need to cut 2 squares that are 4 inches by 4 inches. Bisect each of these squares once, corner to corner, to get 4 triangles. From the dark, you need to cut 5 squares that are 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. From the dark, you also need to cut 4 rectangles that measure 1.25 inches by 6.5 inches. From the medium fabric, you need to cut 8 squares that are 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches and 2 squares that are 5 inches by 5 inches. Bisect each of the 5-inch squares once, corner to corner, to get 4 triangles. Now it's time to start sewing. Please use 1/4-inch seam allowances. Using the 5 dark squares and the 4 light squares that are 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches, we're going to make a 9-patch unit for the center of the block. Start by sewing 3 dark squares to 3 light squares. Bring back the leftover squares and have 2 units that end in dark squares and 1 unit that ends in light squares. Press the seams to the dark fabric. Sew the rows together. The seams will nest to make it nice and easy for you, and you should have dark squares in each of the corners. Hey, let us know in the comments below which state has been your favorite so far, and if you're all caught up on your blocks. We'd love to hear from you. Press away from the center row. Once pressed, the 9-patch unit should measure 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches. For the next sections, you're going to need the 8 light rectangles and the 8 medium squares. You can either draw a line on the wrong side of each of the medium squares from corner to corner, or you can use diagonal seam tape to help guide your lines. I highly suggest making 4 at a time because you need 4 that are on the left side and 4 that are on the right side. Place the medium square on one end of the light rectangle, and then you're going to sew from one corner to the outer corner, from the inner corner to the outer corner. If you drew lines, you're going to sew right on the line. If you're using the diagonal seam tape, you want to have the corner of the medium square follow the center line. When you make the second set of 4, make sure that it's a mirror image of the first set. So this time, I'm putting the square on the right side of the rectangle with right sides together and sewing center upper corner to lower right corner. Once you have the pieces cut apart, you can either trim the seams to 1/4 inch and then press, or you can sew an extra line a 1/2 inch away from the first line to get spare half square triangle units that you can use in another project. If you decide to save triangles like I do, then cut in between the two lines and then head to the ironing board to press. Press towards the medium fabric. Also take time to press those extra half square triangle blocks. Sew the rectangles together where the medium fabrics meet. You should be forming a triangle. It's a little bulky at the beginning of the seam to get through all those layers, so take the first few stitches kind of slowly and let the machine catch up to you. Press the seam open to reduce bulk here in the middle. Once pressed, each of these units should measure 6.5 inches long. The next step is to sew the dark rectangles to the medium triangles. Center the rectangle, there'll be a little point of the medium fabric hanging off each end. Press towards the rectangle. You will sew the light rectangle with the medium triangle to these units. Make sure the triangles point the same direction so you can sew the light fabric to the dark fabric. You want to set aside 2 of these units and then sew the 9-patch unit between the other 2. Once these units are sewn on, press towards the 9-patch unit. Next, we're going to add in the 4 light triangles. We're going to sew them on to opposite sides of the 2 remaining units. You only need to make sure that the sides of the triangle are matching up with the sides of the unit. Don't worry about the triangle that hangs off on the bottom. You can trim off the little bit of the medium fabric that hangs off the side of the seam. I'm just going to finger press these towards the light triangles, but you could also press with an iron. Just 2 seams left and our North Carolina block is done. Sew the large triangles onto opposite sides of the center row. If pressed correctly, these seams at the corners should nest together. Press away from the center row and then head to the cutting table. We will need to trim it down to its final size of 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches. I'm using my 12.5 inch ruler to cut this down, and you're just cutting a little bit off each of the sides. And I use my center white lines to make sure that I've got them on the corners of the 9-patch unit. So we're not trimming off very much of the medium fabric, but a little bit more of the light fabric. So I'm going to show you a picture of this block once it's trimmed to its size of 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches. And then this is my first tester unit that I made, and the band you can see was a little bit thicker, but the measurements just weren't quite right. So it took a little testing to get this one right. We hope you'll remember to hit the like button, Leave us a comment, let us know how you're doing on your blocks, share with your quilting friends, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and happy quilting!